So welcome back. This is the part 2 to the series in which we are building a product-rooted ML application using Python PyQt5. The last video we created 3 UI files using QtDesigner for our 3 windows, and then we also have a music file inside our assets directory. And I just created a empty ptimer.py file inside our main directory, and yeah, let's start coding. So first we need to import these modules. From PyQt5 we need to import QtWidgets, QtCore and UIC, and we also need sys module. Now let's create a class main window which is actually inherited from the QtWidgets.q main window class, and let's define a constructor to that, which is simply loading our main.ui file which we built or created in the last video. So now let's set the window title using the set window title method, and let's set that to ptimer. And now we need a controller class. Why do we need a controller class? So first of all, our application have 3 windows. Sometimes we need to show a window, sometimes we need to hide that window, and in some other cases we also need to close that window. For handling these kind of actions, we need another controller class. It's better to keep a class like that. And let's create a show main method inside that, and inside that we just created a main window object. And the second thing is, in PyQt5, window objects, button objects, widget objects, everything will be hidden by default. So we need to forcefully turn them on by using that show method. And that's it. Let's create an app object, and also we need a controller object, and yeah, let's call that show main method. And that's it. Let's open up the console. Let's go to our directory, like it's in my home/ptimer. Yes, it's in my ptimer, and let's run it using Python 3. So in my machine I have both the Python 2 and Python 3, so I have to specify the Python version here. You may not have to do that, you just have to run Python ptimer. Okay, now let's wait. Okay, fine. Okay, so currently we have our first window here. Like you can see, the title changed, and yeah, nothing's working right now. It's just that UI file, and yeah, let's make it functional. Okay, fine. So the first thing we are going to do is actually configuring this settings button. So if you remember, while creating that UI file, we named this settings button settings. So now we have to use that name to call our settings button. So whenever the user clicks the settings button, we have to run the function toSettings. You have to read this line like that. Whenever the user clicks the button settings, we have to run the toSettings function. Once again, the settings is actually the name that we given to that settings button while creating the UI file. So now we need a toSettings function. So I just created a toSettings function, toSettings method. So we need, right, whenever the user click that settings button, we need to open up the settings window. Currently we don't have that window, and we need to create that window. So anyway, so as I said earlier, we are using the controller function to show, hide and closing windows. So we need something to tell our controller function that the user just clicked the settings button. For that we have PyQt signals. So let's create a signal called the signal to settings, and whenever the user click the settings button, we have to emit that signal to settings. Now we need to handle that signal inside our controller class. Inside the show main, whenever that signal to setting is emitted, we need to call the function show settings. So let's create a show settings here, show settings method. Inside that I'm just going to write, I'm going to settings. Okay, so I'm just going to print that sentence over here. So let's just run our application, see what's happened. Okay, so now on clicking the settings button, it printed that out. Whenever I click that settings button, it emitted a signal called signal to settings, and that signal to settings go to the controller class. Inside that controller class, signal is triggered, we just called another function. Inside that function we just printed that out. Hope that makes sense. And now we need our settings window. For that, let's create another file called both windows, just to make things a little bit readable. just imported the same modules here, and we also created a settings class, and we loaded the settings.ui file, and we changed the title to settings. That's it. Now we need to import that settings class into this file. For that, let's just from auth windows import settings. Now instead of printing that out, we need to show that window. To show that, we need to create an object self.settings equal to settings. So we just created a settings object, and let's show that object. Okay, cool. Now let's run our application and see what happened. Now on clicking our settings button over here, we just got our settings window. Oh, and now we need to work on our main timer part. So as you can see, while creating the UI file, we created this label with the name count, and also we have two buttons, a start and stop button with the name start and stop, and we place the stop button on top of the start button, and yeah, we have a label called a count. Keep that in mind. So let me close this window over here, and yeah, so for handling the timer we need a thread. So if you don't know what a thread is, I will leave a link to a better video explaining thread, and you can watch that. And yeah, so we need a thread. Why we need a thread? Because even while the timer is running, if our user want to go to the settings window, they should be able to go to the settings window. For that we need a thread. So for creating a thread, I just create a new file called utils.py file, and you can write that on here also, but to make it more readable, I just create a new file. And let's import these two modules, and we need a QThread class. Which we are going to inherit to create our own thread. And now we need a Python module called time, and then let's create a class timer thread, which is actually inherited from the QThread class. And let's create a signal, but here the difference is that here we are using a strings signal, but in the main window part we created a signal, but it was a blank signal, it's just emitting that. But here we are using a signal which can carry a string data along with it, so keep that in mind. Now let's create a constructor. This constructor accept a limit value, and we will explain that while running this thread. And then let's call our parent init, and then we create a self.limit_seconds variable, and we just store that limit value inside here. And let's create a run function. So if you don't know about threads, in threads there will be a run method. Whenever we start a thread, this run method will be executed, so keep that in mind. And now we just set a counter variable I, and which is starts from self.limit_seconds, and then while that's greater than 0, we just emit that I value, and then we sleep for 1 second, and then we incremented the value of I. And after completing this while loop, when we comes out of our loop, we emitted an OK, and that's it. So I will explain that with an example. So consider our limit seconds is 10. So first the I value will be 10, and so since 10 is greater than 0, it will emit that. So first it will emit 10, and then it will decrement by 1, so it will become 9, and 9 is also greater than 0, so it will again emit that, and 8, then 7, and 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, and each time the while loop execute, we are actually sleeping for 1 second. So in between these two emission, there is a 1 second delay. So in an effect, what will happen here is that if our limit seconds is 10, and if our limit seconds is 10, then after executing this, it will emit like this, and so this is actually a timer. and I'm not sure this is the right way to create a timer. If you know a better way to do that, you can also give a comment or give me a pull request. You can do that. Yep, that's it. And now, yeah, we just created a class timer thread and we just did this. Now we need to work on our ptimer.py file, our main file. First, let's import that timer thread to our file. From utils we have to import the timer thread, and then inside our init we just specify this. Whenever the user click the set start button, and we need to run the function start timer, so hide that stop button. So by default we set our stop button on top of the start button. So first, inside the init method we have to hide that stop button. I think I forgot to mention this line too. Anyway, now let's come to this part, and whenever the user click the start button, now we don't have that stop button, we hide that, and we only have the start button. And whenever the user click that start button, we need to connect to a start timer method. And now let's create a start timer method here. Inside that we are creating a thread which is a timer thread object, and we are passing a 10 here, which is this limit, which is this limit seconds also. So we just pass that 10 over there, and now we just start it. So while we start a thread, it will actually executing this run method, and then we just, so while running this method it will continuously emitting posts, like each second it will emitting numbers, and inside here we control that signal. So whenever that signal is emitted, we need to connect to another function called change timer, and I'll explain that. And let's create a change timer here, and here it accepts a val. This val is actually this I, like when this emitting str of I, this string is actually that val, and here I'm going to simply printing that, and let's print that out first, and let's see what happened. And yeah, let's see what happened. And like we just showed that stop button, which we make it hidden in the init method, and when the timer starts running we need to show our stop button, and also we need to hide our start button while the timer running. And inside the change timer I just printed that val there, and let's run our application. Let's see what happened. Now pressing the start button, it turned to stop button, and as you can see, it is now working like a countdown timer, and at the end it shows this OK. Fine. Now what we have to do, now we need to set this val to our count label. To do that, let's say self dot count dot set text method. Set text, let me just self dot count dot set text is equal to str of val. Yep, that's it. And now on running our function program again, on running that, while it showing here, we can also see the counter over here. At the end it will show this. Now we need to configure our stop button.